Hello and welcome to our third Meet Your Farmer webinar focused on eggs, meat, and dairy. I'm Amy Mateus. I'm the program director for the Sun Valley Institute for Resilience. Our program, the Local Food Alliance, publishes an annual locally grown guide, which is a comprehensive resource to all things local food. Today, we're joined by my colleague, Mike Gordon, who will be helping out with all the tech stuff. We are recording this webinar, so please stay muted during the presentation. We will have a Q&A session towards the end where you're welcome to turn on your cameras and unmute to ask questions. If you have questions throughout the presentation, please drop them in the chat, which is usually located on the lower right-hand side of your screen. And there's that noise. Okay. Today, we will cover introductions from our farmers and ranchers on the panel, an overview of the conventional livestock industry and what sets our panelists and other regenerative producers apart. We'll then hear details about the regenerative practices of each producer and how they utilize those in their operations, the benefits of regenerative livestock production to the producers and to us consumers, and finally, where to source these products. To narrow down the panelists from our big group of amazing livestock producers in our region, we focused on producers whose products were available at Atkinson's Market. We'll plan for about 15 to 20 minutes at the end for questions for our panelists. And I just want to take a moment and thank our panelists for participating in this webinar. I know you all are busy and I really appreciate your willingness to be here today. So without further ado, I'd like to pass the mic over to our farmers and ranchers for an introduction, to share a little bit about themselves, their businesses, products, how they got involved in the livestock industry. We'll hear more about their regenerative practices a little bit later on in the presentation. But let's start with Alder Spring Ranch. So Glenn, please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about Alder Spring.
First of all, thanks, Amy, for the opportunity to be here. This is going to be a lot of fun. And it's just, I think what I like best about these things is we get to swap stories. And whenever we swap stories, we get to learn stuff. So Glenn Elzinga, I own and operate Alder Spring Ranch with my wife, Carol. We've been doing this for 28 years. We have 7 beautiful daughters who are now moving into adulthood and starting to take over a lot of the leadership on the ranch. We raise and finish a little under 400 head of grass-fed Angus and Angus cross organic beeves a year on the ranch. We run on about 1,600 acres of deeded ground and about 47,000 acres of leased ground from the BLM and the Forest Service, making it one of the largest contiguous certified organic operations in the United States, if not the world. We're profitable, which I'm happy to say. It took us a while to get there and figure that out. It's still razor thin margins in agriculture, but when you're profitable, agriculture becomes a lot of fun. And that's the thing that Carol and I have such a heart for. And my kids are starting to get that too. There's so many desperate people in agriculture. They're depressed, they're suicidal. And we want to just give them a message of hope. And when you partner with nature and create a regenerative operation where you're working on living soil, things can turn around in a hurry. And suddenly you find yourself being profitable. And when you're profitable, it's fun and it's contagious. We hire about 10 interns a year who just want to learn from us and learn what that lifestyle looks like and what it means and how to be profitable in their own operations. And then we hire 5 to 10 star employees. We ship our beef on the internet all over the United States via our web store on alderspring.com. And that's turned now into a $2 million business. And we're grateful. We're just grateful to have the opportunity to not only do that, but to create those relationships. We don't even call customers anymore. We call them partners because they're really so foundational in everything we do. And that's the short story from Alder Spring.
Awesome. Thank you, Glenn. Next, let's go to Spencer Mallett from Harmony Hens. Hopefully his internet is allowing him to chat with us.
All right. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Sounds good. Anyways, yeah, Thank you so much, Amy and Sun Valley Institute, Local Food Alliance, for putting this on. My name is Spencer, and I am here with Harmony Hens today. Just a little bit on my background. I come from about 3 generations, myself included, dairy farmers just here in the Magic Valley. And so the cool thing, just considering this presentation, we're going to be talking about conventional ag a bit. I actually come from conventional ag to an extent. My grandpa came straight from Holland, went straight into the big scale dairy farming, which is what we're familiar with in the valley. And he since then kind of inspired my dad to get into dairying, but my dad headed towards organic dairying. And then now myself, 3rd generation, I said, hey, we already have an organic dairy. We're getting really big into sustainable regenerative ag. We have about 1,600 acres of organic pasture out here, which we're really proud about. And it's just such a joy to be able to steward this land and to continue to expand with the success of our business. But yeah, I decided to diversify into organic laying chickens. After many a small business venture, it looked like there was a gap in the market for organic eggs. And as far as I'm able to tell, people like them. So anyways, yeah, we started technically back in 2019 with the organic egg laying operation, just around 1,200 organic broods. And just this past year, as we speak, I'm getting upwards of 3,500 organic layers. So that's where we're at right now. And very similar to what Glenn said, one of the things that we're really passionate about is just being transparent about what goes into our birds. And I think that's absolutely been appreciated and received well on the consumer end. But with that, we, on our packaging, as much as we're able, just in speaking with people, like to communicate how much they are a partner to the farm, just how much importance it is and significance it is to us, being miles out of town, and sometimes people feel that disconnect. The more we can rope them into, whether it be farm tours, time and the times between COVID and just all the work on the farm allowing, we'd really like to see people actually out on the farms. But the other thing is just communicating that when people spend, every cent they spend on a dozen eggs or more, they're actively feeding the chickens, they're playing a part in it just as much as we are. So yeah, that's Harmony Hens, about 3,000 organic layers and just south of Twin Falls.
Awesome. Thank you, Spencer. And Phil from Old Almo Creamery. Let's have you share a little bit about yourself and your family next. See if he hopefully can come on video.
Am I on? Okay. Hi, everyone. Phil Christensen. Tell you a little bit about our farm. We're basically on the 4th generation. My children are 4th generation on this very same farm ground. We've come a long ways in our farm operation from when my wife's grandfather ran the farm. It was basically flood irrigation, where he basically dug all the ditches. There was no cement. I don't know if you've ever seen the cement ditches that they use, but he dug a lot of the ditches to get water to irrigate it. But we've always been dairymen. My father-in-law has been a dairyman for 30 years. And so he finally decided to quit about 12 years ago. And then I married his daughter 10 years ago. And so we decided to start the dairy back up. But instead of selling conventionally, we decided to go smaller and process all of our own milk with egg milk into cheese and fluid milk and raw milk, pasteurized milk, and sell it individually. And so we started with 3 cows, which I don't know how we even made it those first few years, but we did. Now we're up to 27 cows, and we're just slowly growing as the market takes shape and see how we do. So as it comes to sustainability, we started out conventionally, but we've slowly transitioned to organic, and we feel like that's a good fit for us for the moment. We are kind of debating on exactly how we feel about organic. There's been a lot of paperwork, and it's a little bit of a pain for us to keep track of our milk supply, and but we're debating if we want to stay organic, but we'll still keep the same practices or continue on with the organic program. So, yeah.
So great to hear more about each of your operations. And just a fun fact, in case you didn't pick this up, each of our producers today also hold certified organic certifications, which is a great way to, again, highlight that transparency, even though it comes with some additional paperwork. So that's an interesting thing to learn. Okay, I'm gonna go to the next slide, and we're going to talk a little bit about the conventional livestock situation here in the United States. So when we compare it to regenerative agriculture productions, conventional livestock practices can be considered inhumane by many standards. Taking the animals out of their natural habitats and putting them into farm-like conditions has really led to cheap, consistently available animal products, but at what cost? Perhaps you've heard of battery cages for laying hens, or algae blooms from poorly managed manure, and or the overuse of synthetic fertilizers. These management practices lead to unhealthy animals, unhealthy food, and an unhealthy environment. In the regenerative agriculture world, we have a saying, it's not the cow, it's the how. And the same thing is true for laying hens, dairy cows, and even vegetable production. The way operators manage livestock or food crops truly does matter. How many of you have heard of regenerative agriculture? Did you know that incorporating livestock into the operation is one of 5 key tenets to regenerative agriculture as outlined in Dirt to Soil by Gabe Brown? Many people have heard of no-till or cover cropping, but often overlook this crucial part. Bringing animals back to the land provides lots of benefits, including the reincorporation of natural fertilizers. Poop and pee are nutrients, after all. Grazing can help regenerate ecosystems when managed properly. Animals that are fed a diverse diet, get time outside in the sunshine, and are able to live a more natural life, produce more nutrient-dense meat, eggs, and dairy products. As another saying goes, we are what we eat eats. So now I'm gonna stop my screen share, and we're gonna give each producer an opportunity to share more about their livestock operation, regenerative ag practices. So I'll invite each producer to share about their own practices, and we'll go in the opposite order that we did before. So we'll start with Phil from Old Almo Creamery. So Phil, can you share ways that you utilize livestock to regenerate your farmland and or how you manage in a regenerative way?
Sure. Well, first off, pretty much the cows consume close to about 90% of their feed on the farm. And so we don't have to go out and resource huge amounts of feed for the cows. And so all the feed that we produce is on the farm. So that helps being able to not have to truck feed for the cows. They're also on pasture. They will be, as soon as the grass starts to grow this year, hopefully we'll get the grass growing here. And so they'll be on pasture. We also are toying with the idea, and we're getting closer to having chickens along the cows, just kind of similar with Spencer, what he's doing, having some chickens follow our cows along to help provide a way to spread out the manure, diversify, and kind of keep the fly problem down. And so that's a few things that we're doing. We are trying to get to the point where we are no-till our practices on the farm, but it's a little bit hard to keep track of, get rid of our weed supply without trying to till them out. But we're working towards to more sustainability of our farm. So yeah.
Great, that was interesting to hear more about. And next I'll pass it over to Spencer so he can share how he manages laying hens in a regenerative manner.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, I'm just trying to think. I don't want to be long-winded, but just everything from the pasture to how we raise the hens from chicks. A unique thing that people may not know, specifically within organic standards in terms of laying hens, you have to raise the chick from pretty much the day it was hatched, just so you can make sure that the chicken from day one is being fed organic feed. So that's one thing, is just considering, yeah, the feed we source and the feed we're able to have here on farm. All of it from day one is completely organic. Some people deeper within being able to understand practices might have heard transitional flocks, or even going to cows and other different types of livestock where there's a transition period and they aren't, at least in my mind, entirely an organic animal. So yeah, just I guess further kind of hounding on the, at least for us, the significance of being able to offer the consumers an organic product. Another thing too, with just how we even raise the chickens, considering the spatial requirements that even our organic standards have. Typically when people come out to the farm, we like to actually show them that the birds are on, golly, triple if not quadruple the amount of space that they're required to by standards. So we often like to tell people that, kind of similar to Phil's situation, there's a lot of headache that comes into the organic standard and certification, but actually being able to show people that, hey, we go beyond organic and we go beyond humane animal standards, where if chickens, and whether that be meat chickens or organic egg laying chickens that you buy at Costco or local grocery stores across the country, those people are usually going right to the line, meaning that they're, and not trying to denigrate them or anything, they're still running really good operations. But we're if some farms, that one that you can find at the store is Vital Farms, they're typically 8 acres for their whole flock, whereas we, throughout the summer, our flock experiences, goodness me, probably close to 500 or 600 acres that they get to move to on a daily basis. So that's just some of the things we do. Similar to what Phil said with the cows and the chickens, we typically follow the cows as much as we can. We've about, goodness me, probably about 3,400 head of cow out here, and so I can't follow every single cow with my 3,000 chickens, but I usually follow about 400 or 500 cows and spread out that manure, reduce the fly pressure, which our neighbors really appreciate, and just adding to the biomass of our land. So yeah, that's what we do.
So that's really cool, Spencer and Philip, because you're alluding to exactly what we have discovered. And we weren't pursuing this like regenerative thing, and even not so much organic at the beginning of our journey here. Carol, my wife, is a PhD plant ecologist, and I was a practicing forest ecologist. We both had government jobs in this area of Idaho, so we really came to appreciate the wild lands that surrounded us. And we have this beautiful state we live in that has so many resources like that. We have so much open space around all of us, and it's something we always really cherished, but we didn't think we could really learn that much from it. And what we ended up doing, and this started about early in our as we kind of conceptualized this business 28 years ago, this idea began to take shape about what our operation should look like. And back then, regenerative wasn't a term. Grass-fed was. Organic was like still kind of formative back in the early 90s. Certifications weren't really clear yet. But we knew we wanted it to be something that practiced biomimicry, practice a mimic of nature. And so that's what we're still figuring out. So now our best teacher, our best educator, I mean, we read consummately, Amy brought up those books, and we learned from tons of other practitioners all over the world, you know, listen to podcasts whenever we can, go to conferences, those sorts of things, just to gain new knowledge. We're always learning, but our biggest teacher of all we found is just nature. And so we've taken, you know, what we've learned from nature, and now we practice basically how we can replicate what the buffalo used to do in our country. That's how we actually run our cattle now. We actually run a buffalo mimic. We do you know, this grazing scenario both on our irrigated ground in the Pacimaroy Valley and on those wild range landscapes. We practice a sort of biomimicry that keeps animals in a herd unit moving across these landscapes, and that has been such a game changer, you know. And this was just as regenerative was coming to be a word, and we realized what an opportunity to build soils, what an opportunity to build plant diversity, and what an opportunity to bless our cattle with a unique list of phytochemicals, you know, plant compounds that they can ingest from eating all this kind of diversity. So, you know, the regenerative circle became really wide, and it wasn't only about the soils, it wasn't only about the plants, it wasn't only about our animals, but it became about wildlife. It became about fisheries, water quality. It became about seeing beavers come back. And then, of course, it became this regenerative thing that incorporated even the partners that we have, the people who buy our beef. And, you know, we just see all these dots get connected. And I believe, you know, that's kind of the foundation of what it means to be regenerative. We're not only regenerating the landscape, we're not only putting carbon down in the soil, we're, you know, through these natural mimics, but we're also regenerating ourselves. And that becomes really exciting. And this is what Spencer and Philip were talking about, you know, using birds following cattle around. That's just biomimicry, right? Real live chickens out in the wild do that. Birds of all flock and feather do that. And so, you know, we learn from nature as well, and that's how we practice. So that's really what regenerative means to me.
Thanks, Glenn. I do want to see if you are willing to expand maybe on some of the research that you've done on your property. I know, like, I've seen you say carbon positive. Could you maybe just share with people, what are you doing to kind of flip the script or flip the story around from a lot of people who think that cattle are the problem? Can you just share what's going on over there?
I'll try to make the very, very long story short. So, of course, you know, we knew that just by looking at it, we were seeing plant communities change. We're seeing more plants, even on the ranges, even on these arid range landscapes. We're seeing more plants than we've ever seen before. We have 2,500 native species up there, and a lot of them were well represented. You know, I think we're kind of out of whack because basically these rangelands in Idaho have experienced 120 years of continuous grazing. I mean, basically, you know, right after settlement, people put their cows out there on the range to use that grass resource for over 100 years, and pretty much did not manage it. In fact, you know, fences weren't really put on most of Idaho until the 40s. You know, in the 1930s they started, and by the 40s and 50s, a lot of Idaho was fenced. So that meant free-ranging cattle, pretty much unmanaged, except to capture grass and get cattle to the best grass, to get those cattle to grow as fast as they could. But there was little thought of what the range resource was doing. So as a result, the whole thing's kind of slipped gears on us in terms of plant diversity, in terms of plant density. And we have areas that, you know, you'll find a few native plants maybe tucked in a sagebrush or something like that, but continuous grazing pretty much wiped out a lot of those plants. So we knew we wanted to regenerate those landscapes, especially Carol, the plant ecologist botanist. She knew enough about plant science and plant phenology that we could change our grazing while doing this buffalo mimic that would enable us to get a lot of those plants coming back. So what really kind of made us think completely differently about soil and soil carbon and CO2 equivalents in our soils was I got a friend of mine in Georgia. His name is Will Harris. He's got a ranch called White Oak Pastures, and he and I were talking in the hallway one day at a conference, and he was working on a carbon related life cycle analysis, he called it, with a bunch of university types from across the country. And I said, well, what is that, Will? And he said, well, it's just basically an evaluation of, it's a cost benefit analysis of where we're releasing carbon, either through cows emitting methane, to using diesel tractors, to the packaging in our beef, to how we're actually putting carbon in the ground through grazing opportunities, through manure deposition, through all these things that cattle do to build soils. And I had to get my brain around that initially because, sure, I knew about manure deposition and urea deposition through urine. But so I kind of went through some plant science stuff. I've taken, I was a botany major in college for a while, so I took a lot of plant physiology, but I'd forgotten that when you remove about 50% of the upper plant of a grass plant, but no more than that, what happens is the grass responds in a compensatory way and causes root death that's identical to what you remove with a grazing animal on top. So you have this root death, this root sloughing that occurs, where about 50% of the plant below ground dies commensurate with the plant that got removed above the ground. And this is just basic botany, it's just plant compensating for energy level change. When you leave 50% or better of that plant after grazing animal pasture, you still have enough photosynthetic leaf material that you'll actually be able to put sugars down into the ground and regrow those roots and regrow the plant. But the really, really cool thing is that a grazing animal caused this root death to happen. And that's exactly the mechanism that grazing animals do to deposit large quantities of soil carbon equivalents in the ground. So this, this whole business about cows and, being in feedlots and a corn soybean juggernaut in the Midwest. Sure, there's a lot of appropriate criticism there because, it's it's not climate positive, it's climate negative, and it's carbon negative as well. We're not putting carbon in the ground at all, so we're carbon positive rather. We're not putting carbon in the ground. We have a net release of carbon when we do that, and we're putting it up in the atmosphere. But with a grazing system that's practiced sustainably, and you talked about that a little, Amy, we're actually putting a net of carbon dioxide equivalents in the ground, and we're actually climate positive as a result. And we've actually done the science and the math. So the science and the math basically it's really simple. It's basically take your soil tests 10 years prior, take your soil tests again in 10 years, or it could even be 1 year. We did a 10-year increment. We found that our soil on Alder Spring Ranch's irrigated pastures went from an average of 1.9 soil organic matter all the way up to an average of 6.9. This was measured last year. And when you take that number and assign bulk density values to that, and bulk density is just a simple term that discusses how dense your soil is, you can actually calculate soil carbon deposited pretty easily. It's just simple math. It's a little bit of light algebra. And then you can just take all this stuff is available online as far as how to do it. And I kind of truth checked everything with the same scientists that Will used and made sure I was on the right track. And then you can pull like constants like off of the internet about how to determine how much methane cows exude and all this, emit and all this stuff. So you can put all that in your life cycle analysis calculation, all the way from, how much a plastic bag costs to make in terms of carbon, how much diesel fuel burning does, when we run a tractor. So we put all those things in, and happily we found out we put in over 10,000 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalents in the ground over the past 10 years just on our private ground. And that's exciting stuff because I wanted to know. And I think that we all need to know that, it's just being a responsible producer. So that's kind of a longish story of a very long story, but anyway, hope that helps.
That was incredible. I mean, I know there was a lot of science thrown in there. So we are recording this. So people that want to follow that more closely, watch the recording. We'll share it with everyone. That type of research, I think, is incredible. And that story needs to get out there. And maybe not every producer has the scientific knowledge or the access to research to do it, but just sharing what you've done, I really think helps make the case for regenerative producers. So thank you for sharing that. And really impressed by your knowledge and your dedication to this. It's great.
Well,
so
it's on the shoulders of some very, very smart people from universities, all the way from Texas to Michigan to back east. I asked a lot of people questions, and I encourage anybody to do that. And if anybody listening to a podcast has an interest in pursuing this themselves, have them give me a call. Maybe in the show notes, put my phone number down. I'd be happy to walk them through it and get them started on this road, because it's to me, it's part of what we do in transparency. It's a question now that comes up all the time. Hey, tell me about the carbon story. Before I buy your beef, I want to know if you're carbon neutral. And when they find out that we're climate positive, they get really excited. We were demoing beef in the Boise Co-op one day. I think it was last year, and I was watching my daughters cook beef and talk to people. And I saw one of my daughters start telling them this story about carbon. And this gal, she had 2 little kids with her and her husband. She started actually crying. She was so relieved. She was so relieved that somebody actually had taken the time to figure this out, because this climate change thing was just eating her lunch. And she was so relieved that people are actually taking it upon themselves to figure it out. And I think we need to. I think it's part of what we do.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for sharing that. I'm going to share my screen because we have a couple more things we want to get to, including sharing where you all can source these amazing products from. So I know we're kind of running up on time, and I do want to leave time for Q&A. If you have questions, feel free to share them in the chat. I hope that our farmers are a little flexible and could stay after one to answer questions if we have them. But I will keep this presentation short and sweet. So a couple more things. I just wanted to summarize some of those benefits that we discussed. So benefits to the producers can include the reduced use of imported fertilizer, which in turn boosts soil health and reduces nutrient runoff. It decreases cost and the reliance on extractive mining operations where many fertilizers come from. Proper grazing management can regenerate natural ecosystems, even mitigating fire risks on our public lands and private land holdings. Raising livestock also provides a year-round revenue stream for producers in our high desert, short growing season climate. Benefits to consumers include access to year-round nutrient-dense, locally grown food. Purchasing from our regional regenerative livestock producers helps promote more humane animal husbandry, and their management practices may lead to an increase in biodiversity and restored ecosystem functions. As we heard from Glenn, they've seen a drastic improvement in both riparian habitat and an increase in the diversity of flora and fauna on the rangelands they utilize. To me, this sounds like a big win across the board. Now that we've talked about regenerative livestock management, let's talk about where you can source these locally raised products. So Alder Spring Ranch products are available locally at all the Atkinson's markets, and their full product line is available at their web store, alderspring.com. And they have a vast product list, including grass-fed and certified organic beef, their wild cow beef jerky and beef sticks, wild hunter pet foods and treats, some leather goods and merchandise. They also sell certified organic lamb, heritage raised pastured pork and poultry, as well as my favorite, an artisanal sheep cheese from a producer up there in the Salmon Carmen area. Harmony Hens products are also available at Atkinson's Market, as well as Nourish Me and through Della Provisions. Their eggs are on the menu at the Mason family restaurants, included in their house-made pasta line. At CK's Real Food, Raspberries, and Cafe Della. Harmony Hens sells their eggs by the carton at various retail locations and provides eggs by the case for wholesale customers. They're also certified organic. Old Almo Creamery retail products are available at Atkinson's Market, Nourish Me, and Craze Market and Garden. Their milk is used at various coffee shops throughout the valley, including Maud's in Ketchum, Hank and Sylvie's in Ketchum and Haley, and the Conditorei in Sun Valley. Raspberries and CK sorts their products for various menu items as well. Old Almo products include certified organic cream line, which is pasteurized but non-homogenized whole milk, raw milk, shredded cheese, and eggs. And just as a quick reminder, be sure to ask if they source locally at your favorite restaurant, retail store, or coffee shop, as consumer demand is one of the best ways to promote the procurement of locally grown food. So I know I rushed through that, so hopefully you all got it, but again, we'll share the slides with you after the fact. Now that we've learned all about regenerative livestock production, let's jump into the Q&A. We can see contact info here, and I'll invite each producer to add any contact info they'd like into the chat as well. Glenn, I didn't put your phone number on here, but if you want to share it, you're welcome to. And I'm going to stop my screen share now. Well, let me quickly say that we have a survey. I'll drop the link in the chat. You can also scan this QR code, and we'd love to hear your feedback today. So back to question and answer. I'll stop my share, and please feel free to add questions in the chat, or if you want to ask a question, you can raise your hand and I can call on you to unmute and go for it. And I don't see any burning questions. I have some questions I prepared if we want to get into those. I guess I will start by just asking each producer, like, what is the best way for people on this webinar to support you? Glenn, you're unmuted, so you can go first.
Atkinson's is the best way. The Atkinson family has just been wonderful to work with. We've been in that store for many years. It was funny when we started with them because I was in Whit and Chip's office, and these two meat cutters came in, Mike Tackett and Mike Woodall. They're the Haley and Ketchum store head meat shop individuals, you know, and they came in wearing their white coats, and I swear they had big butcher knives under their coats because they were tough. They asked me really hard questions, and they sat on either side of me. And finally, Whit had to jump in there, and so did Chip. And they said, "Hey, just calm down. Don't kill this guy. We want him to have his beef in here." So it was really cool. You know, we've had a great relationship with them, and you know, we've just become friends. And we have an extended friendship with so many people in the Wood River Valley who support us through that market. It's been wonderful. There's things that they don't sell that we can certainly ship out of our fulfillment center in Salmon, Idaho. And the shipping is free. I think the number is now over $200 to the Wood River Valley. We ship in a completely recyclable package. So, and it's no cost to you to ship it. So if you know you're interested in lamb or pork or things that the Atkinsons don't carry, you could check us out at alderspring.com, and that partnership is treasured by us, and we really appreciate you all.
Awesome. Thanks, Glenn. Let's jump over to Phil. Phil, how can people on this webinar support you? And you're muted, just so you know.
Okay. The best way is just to talk to the stores that you go to and say, hey, I'd like to get these products. We'd like to support local. We're excited about what they do, and be able to ask. Basically, is the biggest help is to be able, once people know that it's available, and by word of mouth, really is the best way is word of mouth, because people will trust your friends versus what they can see on the internet or what they can observe. So
I appreciate that. I'm going to ask Phil while we have him off mute. There was a question about, will Old Almo have glass bottles anytime soon? Do you want to address that?
Yeah, when we first started our dairy, we did use glass bottles. It was working great, but then we just ran into a big problem with getting our bottles back, making sure they were clean. It was really, unfortunately, it was a point that we couldn't sustainably do it. I know other dairies use glass bottles like Cloverleaf, And it's just, it wasn't financially stable for us to use glass. We had to make that decision with heavy heart, to switch to plastic. Um, just the amount of milk we were selling, just we couldn't keep up with the be able to get the glass back in time, and the financial incentives wasn't there to keep doing that. Um, Partly because in order to purchase glass bottles, you have to basically have $2,000 bare minimum amount order, and it was like every 6 months we had to do that, and it just wasn't financially stable for us to do. But our bottles are recyclable, so we outsource and try to find our the jugs, the plastic bottles that are recyclable. So that's one thing that we've done. So yeah.
I really appreciate your honesty on that. I know it's definitely hard. Like, you have to think about all those expenses when making decisions. And even though a lot of us love the glass bottles, they are, they're cleaning, sanitizing, getting them back. They're also heavy, right? So that changes
Exactly.
transportation costs. I'm hesitant to ask you this because I think I already know the answers, but would you ever consider doing like a personal bottle deposit, or like some type of situation with Nourish Me where people could maybe refill their own glass bottles?
We looked into that, but unfortunately we sold our washer, our bottle washer. Um, it was just a headache getting them back and getting them cleaned. I'm serious. We would get them back, and there was about that much of a little force in the bottom of the bottles that had to be sanitized and be able to get that cleaned. And it was just a nightmare. Unfortunately, if I was able to get them back perfectly clean, but no, it wasn't. It just was such a headache to try to get them cleaned and get them processed again. So yeah.
Okay. So I hear we consumers take a lot of ownership over how we contribute to these types of processes. So if you really appreciate glass, make sure you clean it for your producers. Same thing with maybe egg cartons, right? Can we give back egg cartons? Can we share things? Can we take better care of the product so that our producers aren't bearing the burden of all of that? Yeah, cheesy bottles are not fun to deal with. I don't like them either. I can't imagine what it's like getting them as a producer who has to worry about food safety, all that kind of stuff. Because our home is one thing, but your farm is another thing. So thank you for that. And I'll go over to Spencer. Spencer, now, what can people on this webinar do to support you?
Yeah, just piggybacking off of Phil, supporting. I was just going to further say supporting the people that are supporting us. And so as I've talked to specific chefs and people within the Wood River Valley that are buying our eggs, using them in different products, actually showcasing the eggs themselves, or even doing little retail things like Cafe Della uses it in their food, as well as sells our eggs retail. The biggest thing with them is just, if you see somebody that already is carrying our product, if you can support them further by buying other products there and asking that they continue to support other local producers, getting some really good beef in there, some really good, milk as well. And even seasonal vegetable products. The further we can just support these people, the more encouraged they will to be supporting us. And part of that too, I know all of the chefs and restaurants that we are getting food to, the biggest thing with them is just consumers and the whole price negotiation, trying to make that whole side of things work. And so they're off the bat, as soon as I talk to anybody, super stoked to, get local product in. But if their consumers aren't reflecting that they're able to pay for real food, what real food costs, then that can sometimes sour relationships, but just between producers and people that are buying our product. So yeah, that kind of goes into a whole a whole rabbit trail of discussion on prices and stuff, which if people have questions, I'd be happy to delve into that. But one thing too is just within that, as the theme throughout this has been transparency and acting as our consumers or partners. Just I think too, one way that consumers and anybody can support us is just engage with us. In the same way that Glenn talked about, speaking with other stewards and other people that are engaged in being producers. It's so encouraging for us to hear people that like our eggs, our meat, our milk. So even if it is something where, hey, I have a hard time with my budget for this month buying your milk, but I'll buy it next milk or your eggs. Just saying like, hey, we really like what you're doing. We'd like to come see what you're doing, and maybe we'll get a discount on eggs or something. I don't know. I can only speak for myself, but as people just continue to encourage us, speaking for myself, the generosity just further wants to pour out, and so that's beyond the tangible dollar, as I say. If people can affirm what we're doing and encourage us that way, that's huge.
I really appreciate that. I often, there's like as the saying goes, something like 9 out of 10 people will complain about something, not say something positive. And I know I kind of get hung up on like, well, the farmers are busy. They don't want to hear from me, even if it's just like, thank you so much for your product. So I really appreciate you saying like, no, you want to hear from people, especially when it's positive, because it reinforces that. So thank you for that word of advice. I will take that to heart. And I'll just share, I appreciate and really like all of your tasty products that you all produce. It's really fun to go to Atkinson's and load up my cart with all these amazing local products and take a photo and post it on Instagram. I think that's really fun to do. So I know we're getting close to the 1 o'clock hour. We don't have any more questions in the chat. So maybe what we'll do is just go around again to our producers and like, are there any last words of wisdom or stories or anecdotes you want to share with us? So let's start with Phil this time around.
Okay. Really, it was interesting. I think about a week ago, someone called me, asking me about my milk, and they were really surprised that the person they were talking to was the person who was milking the cows and who was putting the bottle in, putting it in the bottle. And so I was really surprising that people are sometimes afraid to call and talk to producers. And just like with Glenn too, if you get on with us and we start talking about how we're passionate, we can talk people's ears off. And so it's funny because I asked them, is like, how much time do you have when they call me? Because I can talk all day about dairy industry. But yeah, we're doing our best, and the best thing for us as producers is to know that we're doing a good job. That attaboy is really helpful, when we're working long hours, and when we know that people really appreciate what we're doing, really helps. So yeah.
Thanks for that. Spencer, why don't you go next?
Yeah, I'll try to be quick. I actually had something that just popped up in my head, which is, I'll just throw it out there. I am actually looking for some people within the Magic Valley to consider some kind of internship or employment through my farm. I do have an employee. I have one full-time and part-time employee, but it's kind of been hard, and they're actually looking to go to school, college. And so just kind of throwing that out there. I don't know how many people are on here, or if there is interest, or even just, the other producers right here, you, Amy, if there are people out there looking to dive into this kind of stuff, I just wanted to throw that out there at the end. I can't promise anything, it's a hard life out here, but there's a good bit of joy in it. So that's just something I wanted to throw out. But yeah, just to kind of cap off at Harmony Hens, who we are. I just further adding to what I said earlier, I'm just so passionate about communicating and engaging with the consumer. And so similar to what Phil just said, you know, I can talk your ear off for hours, but if you have specific questions, things you want to discuss, even outside of food, whether it be preparing our food or discussing how you can do something on your property, I am equally passionate. And I can't say I'm super well versed. I'm on here and only have about 22 years under my belt of this life, but you know, I'm excited to help any way I can. So engage with me in that way. Amy did share our contact info, but specifically for people on here, my number is 208-308-1000. Give me a ring if you need, and I'll help any way I can. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you, Spencer. I'm adding your number into the chat right now, so maybe some people will take you up on that.
Yeah.
Glenn, last words of wisdom, story, whatever it is you want to share.
Oh, you know, I just keep hearing, you know, I subscribe to all the conventional trade magazines in agriculture, and boy, there's a lot of unhappiness out there. There's a lot of farmers and ranchers seeking counseling because they feel hopeless, and the hair color that I have is very common in agriculture today. You guys, you two guys are pretty young, but you know, I'm 59, and the average age, I looked it up just because I was curious. Average age in America is 57.5 years, and you know, and that means we have an aging farmer population. And a lot of them have, I think they've kind of given up hope. They have equity in the bank because a lot of them own their property, and they're like, this is what I'm going to retire on. I'm going to cash out and sell. But I'm wondering to who, unless if we start building a relationship with the next generation, you know, just like Spencer's talking about, you know, he just hung up a sign right now and said, hey, I'm looking for some people who want to maybe have a passion about this. And I think that kind of grassroots thing, you know, building those relationships with young people and building relationships back with our consumer are the things that have given agriculture the loss of hope, because we've broken those connections with those different, you know, relationships. We've lost a relationship with nature in agriculture, and we've lost a relationship with our fellow humans, you know, whether it be a partner as a customer or a partner that we can invest in as a young person. And I think we just need to get back to that. And if we do, we'll be able to make agriculture win again. We'll be able to fill agriculture with hope. And it's not like it's on us. It's on all of us collectively, you know, both as the eaters of the food and the growers of the food, to rebuild those relationships and get that continuum back in place, where commercial agriculture has really, you know, disenfranchised people with where their food comes from. And it's actually pretty simple. And it's not something that you can just throw in with legislation or politics or whatever. It's just picking up the phone and calling Philip and saying, Philip, this milk is awesome. Thank you. And Spencer, these eggs are just wonderful. Thank you. You know, so I just want to encourage people to do that, to build those relationships, because we love it. It's the thing that gets me up in the morning.
I'm tearing up a little bit. I mean, this is one of the reasons I'm so grateful for the job that I have, is to really build that affinity between producers and consumers. It's one of the reasons we're hosting this webinar series, because as COVID has changed our world over the last year, it's been a lot harder for people to connect at farmers markets or at restaurants and grocery stores. So while this Zoom, it's not perfect, it's better than nothing. So I wanted to share, in case you all didn't see in the chat from Lexi, thank you for all you do for this community. I know as a mom, I love being able to feed my kids these amazing products. And I think start them young on local food. I know I was, and it really helped me build that as a value within myself, where I could never imagine going into a supermarket and just buying anything off the shelf where I didn't know where it was come from or who raised it. And I think that's something that when we teach kids that at a younger age, it really builds that as a value system. in their psyches, and that will be easier as they become adults to continue to integrate that in. Versus it's harder, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. You can, but it's a lot harder, right? So it's harder to switch people over to a local based diet if they've spent their whole life eating conventional supermarket shelf food. So start kids young if you can. I appreciate that a lot. And I'm going to just share my screen one more time so we can see their contact info quickly. Another nice thanks for everything you all are doing for the rest of us. It's really appreciated. Oh, and thank you for sharing that TED Talk from Ron Finley, the guerrilla gardener, in the chat. He's incredible. He was at our forum last year and made a really great comment of like, how do we make gardening a panty dropper? So if you don't get that reference, it's like, how do you make gardening and farming sexy, right? Because the younger generation, like things need to be sexy and appealing to them. So I appreciate Ron Finley's work a lot. Another reminder, please take our survey. Let us know how we did today and whether you learned something new or inspired to buy local products. And finally, this is one webinar in a series of webinars called our Meet Your Farmer webinar series. And we have 2 more coming up on May 26th and June 30th. If you're registered today, you are registered for the whole series. So you'll get a reminder email about that. But I'm happy to stay on. I don't know what the schedules are like for our producers on the call today, but if anyone else wants to chat, if you all want to stay and talk more, I will hold the space for us. But I also understand if you need to run because you've already given us over an hour of your time already. So no last minute burning questions. I'm like interested, if you all have time to stay, I would love to hear from like each of you of like, what's your favorite thing to eat with your own products, whether it's a recipe, a meal, just like a hard-boiled egg, etc. Please share with me. See, thinking, whoever wants to jump in, you all can.
I'll go first. So we make cheese, and so it's funny because whenever my wife makes a meal or something, it's like I always ask her, why is there no cheese on this? And as growing up as in the town, we really didn't eat a lot of cheese because cheese wasn't expensive. But it's just interesting now that we just have cheese available, and it's just usually just cheese makes things so much better. But yeah, that's what I like to eat with my everything. So
I love that. I definitely used your cheese a lot. And my husband loves pizza that I make using Hillside Grain Flour, another local producer who's been on a previous webinar, and it just smother it with all your cheese. So it's awesome. Okay, who's next? Who wants to share what they love eating of their local products?
I'll go ahead. Goodness me, there's so many things I'm thinking about. So some simple things you can do, obviously, would just be a solid fried egg in the morning. I like to keep it simple, meaning a lot of people really dress up their egg, and sometimes I won't even eat my egg with salt and pepper, just egg and a good slice of grass-fed butter just simmering in there. I will say what it's incredible with, and I'm putting a plug in there for Powerhouse in Haley, sells a Verde green hot sauce. And if you put a dab of that on there, it is incredible. So that's the very simple stuff. Some of the other things, I really like my eggs in like a frittata or quiche, as a Cafe Della makes them. Those are incredible, super light, really flavorful. Stop by and yeah, support Cafe Della or look into making it at home. And then 2 other ways, throw in our eggs in pasta. It's a game changer, which is what Mason Family Provisions up in Ketchum does in all 3 of their restaurants. They use our eggs for their amazing pasta. Give them a try, support them, and give it a try at home. It's really easy. I've done it before. And then a last kind of unique way to do eggs, if you have some good kosher salt, try curing a raw egg. So in the same way people cure meats, what you can do is just take a simple little Tupperware, fill it about halfway up with some really good salt, kosher salt, and then make a, similar to like with what you would do with flour, make a little bowl in the middle of that salt, and then crack a raw egg into that salt, and then cover the whole egg up with salt. And I think just about a week, and the entire raw egg will cure, very similar to like a cured meat prosciutto or something, become hard and like almost gelatin-like. And then you can take a Parmesan grater and you can grate your cured egg over salads, over pasta, over a sandwich, and it's incredible. So throw that out there.
Wow, that sounds really interesting. I've seen that, haven't tried it yet, but I'm inspired to try. I will quickly just do a shameless plug for a fundraiser that the Sun Valley Institute for Resilience is doing. And we have a quiche from Cafe Della in there, along with a bunch of other delicious items. So I'm dropping that link in the chat if you feel inclined. We would appreciate your support on that. And Glenn, go ahead with your favorite way to eat your beef, or a couple ways.
So thanks for validating that, Amy, because I thought Spencer was making that whole thing up. Because I'm going to try it. That sounds crazy, but I am definitely going to try it. So if you kill me, Spencer, you're going to hear about it. I'm going to get it to come back to you. So anyway, I think what I like the best is, it's like Spencer, said, just super simple. So I find myself when we're up on the range in cow camp, somewhere around 2 or 3 in the afternoon, I start thinking about steak. And, it doesn't have to be a ribeye, although that would be ideal. Usually I can't afford to eat my own ribeyes because there's people who value them much more than I do in terms of economics, because we sell out of them almost every week. So, it might be a sirloin or a flat iron steak, or maybe it's just a sirloin flap, but I put it over a fire in cow camp with a little bit of salt and pepper on it, and just cook that to medium rare, but have nice caramelization on both sides of it. So I got a nice browning going on. So it's pretty hot fire. And I just flipped that over on the grill just once or twice until I got that, that finish and that medium rare interior with just a little bit of salt and pepper. And then I let that rest to the side of the fire, usually with about a quarter stick of butter sliced over top of that. And then my dreams are realized. I've been waiting for that for hours, and here we are, just sitting cross-legged by the fire, eating that steak, and it's getting dark, and I'm watching the crew and the lanterns going, and it just sets everything right.
I'm hungry. I don't know about you all, but after hearing all 3 of your descriptions, I am hungry. I wasn't planning to have a steak for dinner tonight, but I might have to go to Atkinson's and pick one up. I don't know if anyone makes these preserved eggs for sale, but I might start doing that. And Phil, I've got a delivery from Craze coming today with some of your cheese and milk. So we'll be dining on that soon. So appreciate you all and your time today and your insight and just being so transparent with us. I'm really inspired by each and every one of you and the work you're doing. So thank you again for being here. And there's a lot of thank yous in the chat, and my stomach's growling. Yeah, mine is too. So we won't keep this going any longer, but again, thank you all for being here. It was a pleasure to have this conversation, and hopefully we can do one again soon, because this was really fun, and I'm sure we can spend another hour chit-chatting about cool stuff going on in your operations.
All right. Thank you, Amy. And thank you, SVI, for putting this on. This has been a great opportunity to just swap stories.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Amy, and Sun Valley Institute. Thanks to Glenn and Phil. Appreciate you guys being here, and to you, whoever you are, we really appreciate you just being on here. Your presence on here, listening on while you're driving somewhere or sitting on the couch. It's an affirmation in itself. So thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, just as well. Thanks for the opportunity to talk. We love talking about our stuff. So yeah.
Good.
Wonderful. Thank you. And I think we are going to stop the recording and end